Neptunia Cross Senran Kagura Ninja Wars has finally made its way to Nintendo Switch after releasing on PS4 last year. It's a crossover between the Hyperdimension Neptunia and Senran Kagura series, featuring characters from both universes in a story about war. The story is presented like a visual novel, whereas the gameplay is mission-based action. So, all things considered, is it worth checking out on Switch? Well, let's find out. The story takes place on Gamninjustri, a continent that's home to two great competing nations, Heartland, which is your main base and home of the Compa-style ninja, and Marvland, home of the Honeypaw-style shinobi. The two have been at war for a while, but ultimately have to work together to defend their home when attacked by the Steam Legion, a foreign nation led by Yo Gamer, who declared war against them to decide who has the world's strongest school, in an event called the Super Ninja War. If that sounds a little absurd, that's because it is. The story doesn't take itself too seriously and is very lighthearted despite the looming war, which can lead to some funny moments. Of course, with this being a crossover game, many characters from both the Neptunia and Senran Kagura games will appear in the story. You'll meet 4 characters in Heartland, Neptune, Noir, Vert, and Blanc, who have the power to transform into ninja goddesses, which they'll need to fight against the Steam Legion. While they're in this form, their name, personality, and design all change. Neptune becomes Purple Heart, Noir becomes Black Heart, Vert becomes Green Heart, and Blanc becomes White Heart. Noir comes across as somewhat harsh due to her struggle with her showing her true feelings, and then there's Vert, who is the more mature of the group despite spending a lot of her time playing video games, along with Blanc, who is shown to be on the quiet and composed side and thinks before she acts. Of all the characters, Neptune in my opinion is the most interesting, mainly because she seems to understand that she's the game's protagonist and knows about fourth wall breaking things like the existence of fan service scenes, as well as the game itself being a crossover between both universes, and I find it hilarious that the rest of the characters just don't seem to understand what she's talking about whenever she does break the fourth wall. Even though the story setup is interesting, I didn't find it to be all that special. Considering the nations are at risk, the characters still have time to banter and joke around, which for the kind of game this is probably an intentional design choice for the story since it's not trying to be super serious, but I think the story really lacks in moments where the characters are genuinely fearful for the outcome of this war. When key things did happen, like facing some important enemies later in the story, the stakes didn't really seem all that high. It's fine for what it is, but it doesn't really do much overall that surprised me. Same goes for the characters too. They're not badly written, but they do fall into the typical tropes you'll see in a lot of anime, which makes them stand out less in terms of personality. What does make them stand out, however, is their designs, which were definitely made to catch the eye, for lack of a better term. Also, the story is really short, lasting just around 10 or so hours, but even with that brief time, it felt like I was doing a lot of reading, as there is a lot of dialogue and no dub available for it, which I personally would have preferred for a game that's more of a visual novel. Outside of the story, you'll be taking advantage of the many amenities of your main base, Heartland, where you can select all kinds of things to do from a menu. Shinobi Base is where you'll go to choose which characters to bring out into battle, or adjust your ninja art skills and equipment, as well as equip spirit gems, which give you passive effect boosts, like an increase in attack power, damage resistance, and an increase in EXP. Stacking spirit gems in a row will also afford you even higher bonuses. This system adds another element of customization to your party, and I thought it was pretty cool to see. I generally went for builds that boosted my HP, so I didn't have to rely on my items as much. Market Street is where you'll go to buy items, equipment, or spirit gems for use in battle. The Komatsu Shrine is my personal favorite, and is where you can accept quests for rewards. You'll have objectives to fulfill, such as killing a number of enemies or collecting a specific number of items before the time runs out. Considering that the gameplay is my favorite aspect of this game, it's no surprise that completing a bunch of missions that reward me handsomely is my favorite thing to do. Komatsu Shrine is also home to the Treasury, where you can view character bios, rewatch events in the story, listen to the background music, and more. And then there's Peaches and Cream Meditation. This is a mode where you can work on your character's balance by trying to stay upright on a peach using either gyro controls or the ZL and ZR buttons. It's one of the more fan-servicey aspects of the game, so I didn't spend a ton of time here as I was too busy doing requests and grinding missions to collect items, but this is yet another way to give you an edge in battle by giving you things like HP boosts as well as provisions pills. I can't say I really enjoyed this mode because moving my controller to keep my balance wouldn't be my definition of engaging gameplay, but for those who want to grind items or take advantage of every possible stat buff, there is some incentive to spend time with this mode. And finally, Nin Chat is where you can speak with the characters that appear in the story. Most won't have much worthwhile to say, but if you talk to characters with red exclamation points above their heads, a scenario will start which generally are related to current events happening in the story. This is usually where you can find some funny interactions between the characters. Once you're done preparing at Heartland though, the world map is where you'll go to head out on missions, either to progress the story or revisit past areas to do things like collect all of the items in a specific location. And this is where my favorite element of the game comes into play: the battle gameplay. In missions, you'll have both a leader and a partner together in battle, which provides plenty of options. All characters can perform a basic combo by mashing Y, and also have access to projectiles like shuriken and kunai to attack enemies at long range, which can be thrown with X. Each character can also have access to 4 different ninja art skills, which can be used after building up your special attack gauge, seen on the bottom left of the screen. To shake things up, these skills can also be swapped or changed as you progress and unlock more that are useful for different situations. Some allow you to rapidly attack your enemy, and others cover a wider range which can cover enemies surrounding you. You're also encouraged to chain these ninja art skills. After using a skill, you'll see the word trigger appear on screen, and you want to use another skill before the gauge runs out. And depending on what skill you use, various things can happen, such as the power boost or an application of status effects. As you deal damage, a red gauge that appears around your character's portrait builds up, and when it's full, you'll be able to do a super powerful attack called Shinobi Extreme. Each character has one with a unique animation for them, and they're all very satisfying to see. Something else I really like is the ability to swap between characters with a single button press. Even cooler is being able to do it mid-combo, which is nice for keeping your attack pressure going. The fact that the game has many ways to push you towards keeping up your attack is why I'm such a huge fan of the battle system. The combat here reminds me of old PS Vita games like Ragnarok Odyssey, and I mean that in a positive way. The gameplay has this charm to it that I really enjoyed. It's fast-paced and satisfying, and the controls feel very natural despite there being a good amount of depth. Thanks to the game being mission-based in that you select a dungeon and jump in, it made it really easy to just hop in and fight some enemies whenever I wanted to check out a new skill I acquired, or test out a new character that joined up in the story. And speaking of characters, Yumi is probably the best character to use in my opinion. She has a skill called Raging Snow Moonflower that does continuous massive damage to an enemy. It's a great move for bosses because of how overpowered it feels. She doesn't exactly break the game because other characters can do a great deal of damage as well, but the fact that it's just a constant string of damage is really awesome. The system isn't perfect though. I found that the smaller enemies, which make up most of who you'll be fighting, kind of just sit around and let you wail on them for a bit before finally striking back. It's a little awkward. The game also isn't really all that hard either, which didn't really give me a ton of reasons to utilize every single option to boost my offense. All that really felt necessary was to stock up on healing items every now and then throughout the story, but thankfully for those who want more of a challenge, there is a hard mode available. Only thing is, while this does make enemies hit harder, it doesn't fix that awkwardness of the enemies kind of just sitting around while you're attacking them. The game looks alright visually. The cel-shaded character and enemy models look good and the environments are solid enough, although it might look a little worse on Nintendo Switch than a PlayStation version due to a lower resolution that lends it a softer appearance, along with gameplay that sits at around 30 FPS with regular dips during combat, as opposed to the PS4's 60 FPS. The frame rate dips are distracting, but not enough to negatively affect my overall gameplay experience. Interestingly and thankfully, the HUD elements do run at 60 FPS, so the game is perfectly smooth during story sections. One advantage that the Switch has is that it will include an additional easy and hard mode that I mentioned earlier, as well as new outfits, possibly adding value for those who plan on double dipping. Overall, I enjoyed Neptunia x Senran Kagura Ninja Wars. Even if the story and characters weren't that interesting to me personally, I found the battle system to be great, and the fact that there were a lot of challenges to do outside of the main story is pretty sweet. While I didn't always use every feature available to prepare for battle, I like that there are so many options that can give you advantages where it counts. All of these aspects came together and helped carry the game for me in spite of the somewhat lacking story. I liked Neptunia x Senran Kagura Ninja Wars. It's one of the games where I'm able to overlook the story's flaws and enjoy the gameplay for what it is. Previous fans of Hyperdimension Neptunia or Senran Kagura, or even just fans of anime action games, might find a lot to enjoy here, and there's no doubt a good amount to dig into here. And that's going to do it for my review of Neptunia x Senran Kagura Ninja Wars. Thank you all so much for watching, and make sure you subscribe to GameXplain for a lot more on Neptunia x Senran Kagura and other things gaming too. Until next time.